All right, once again, a big thank you to Dennis and Hingham for this beautiful piece of technology, which is much more advanced than I am. And actually, you can hear the overall quality of stuff sounds much more crisp. We may actually need the pop covers. These things came with, this is a little pop cover. Anyway, nobody cares. So let's.
Morgan says it sounds clean and good.
Beautiful. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you. I'm still learning. Got a lot of learning to do here. I think we should probably start with. Well, I mean, where do you want to start? So much stuff has been happening.
It's hard to know.
The Trump nominees are coming in. All my friends who are big Trump fans are thrilled with everything. They want Oz. They want all these folks. What's interesting is that if you were to have followed the media and when the Gates and RFK thing happened in Tulsi, etc., you would have thought that, wow, it looks like a lot of the Gates stuff is absolute rubbish. It looks like the accuser of the Gates stuff is absolute rubbish. Not that I don't even know if that necessarily matters. Like the whole thing of having people who can be compromised. That's the thing, right? If they can be compromised, if somebody has something on them. And it seems like just going by his personality, that Gates would be a guy who's good to go. Or that, considering, all the stories about him with like Red Bull and Viagra and all this other stuff. But who knows? Maybe there's nothing to it. It got so bad that they had to make a clarification on
The View.
On The View, exactly, which is fantastic. Just fantastic.
On screen. Sonny, you have a legal note.
I do have a legal note. Thank you, Whoopi. Matt Gaetz has long denied all allegations, calling the claims, quote, invented, and saying in a statement to ABC News that this false smear following a 3-year criminal investigation should be viewed with great skepticism. That DOJ investigation was closed with no charges being brought.
We'll be right back. On screen. Sonny, you have a legal note.
So this is all true. Morgan saying all charges were dropped against the Tate brothers, too. That a lot of this is like
really?
Trump stuff. I mean, they're still trying in New York, essentially saying that judge in New York with the hush money payments, that whole thing is saying that
Meacham or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, that they're going to just pause it and do the sentencing after he's president, which seems insane to me. Like, I can't imagine that they're just going to go forward like this. It's so incredible to me that they're still trying to do this stuff and like smear Trump in this way for stuff that really doesn't matter at all. And like, if anything sinks Gates, I don't know if it'll be that as much as it'll be, I mean, like if they release this congressional testimony out there, right? And like, and if the Senate balks at it, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think anybody's going to bring charges against him at this point, but I don't get the sense that he's particularly well liked on Capitol Hill, which could have an impact. But like you and I were talking about in the car, it does seem like there would be enough Republicans to vote against him, maybe behind closed doors. This is like the rumors that everybody's saying, like, oh, there's at least 10 to 15 senators who are going to vote against him, blah, 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 blah. But that being said, this is something I read. I didn't invent this, but I think it's a really good point. It's easy to be the 15th senator who says that you're not going to vote for Matt Gaetz. It's really hard to be the fourth one, right? Because he can lose 3 votes. So those first 3, like, okay. But to be that fourth person you're going to be the one to sink the nomination.
Right. Yeah.
That's a tough thing. And then to like earn Trump's ire and all that stuff over it. It remains to be seen. I do still think Gaetz is going to be the hardest one of these to get through. I think in general, I think the Senate tends to give the president pretty broad latitude, especially if they're controlled by his own party. I think they tend to give the president pretty broad latitude to make his own selections. And they generally don't vote against people for philosophical reasons. It's generally only for like deep character flaws, right? So if anything sinks Gates, I think that'll be what it is. I think that will be, it'll be a personality thing by members of the Senate, but I don't see similar problems with RFK Jr. I think, even though, and I have friends who think that he's going to be screwed because so many senators get so many donations from pharmaceutical companies. But I just think there's so much agreement across the political spectrum, especially on a lot of the food stuff, that it's going to be tough to explain why you refuse to vote for him, especially since a lot of these people liked him 10 years ago before the food purity issue became more of a Republican coded thing. It's really going to be difficult to explain to people why you're not voting for him.
So the question is, or I think the concern is, or an emphasis of the conversation is, for a lot of these folks, that that you wonder if any of them can handle being the head of these giant bureaucracies. Because Gates has not done this. RFK Jr. has not done this. Tulsi has not done this. Probably, in truth, almost no American has ever done this. I mean, the bureaucracies are too big to. The bureaucracies are too big for one person. But you're right. You say, did Biden's people? No, Gina Raimondo did not run something that big. Obviously, Mayor Pete had never been to a container ship before. He was the mayor of it. But, the thing about managing is that you make things small by having a few people who you're delegating, and they delegate to other people, etc. So I think that if somebody fairly confident or competent whatsoever can handle now, and once again, these aren't necessarily, with the exception of RFK, these are not these people's fields of expertise. That said, that is nothing new as well.
Right, of course.
So, yeah, I'm not concerned about what happens. I do think that it's going to be treated, well, depending if any of the liberal media is still standing, but it's going to be treated like this is absolutely not normal. And this is something that is unique to Trump, and this is special chaos, and so there'll be some factions that do whatever they can, which will not be the case with Joe and Mika, because they're going to be at Mar-a-Lago. So one thing I'm noticing about the Roadcaster is that our mics are picking each other up a lot. Morgan, do you have a Roadcaster? If let me know if you do, because my mic is Alice's mic is picking me up, and my mic is picking her up. If you can hear that, Morgan, let me know if your ears are catching that.
I mean, my phone's dead now, so I can't look at the manual that I have pulled up anymore. But it did have a thing for that. You have outputs there specifically for audio monitoring that are designed
I just wondered if you knew something really quick. This is all new. This technology is 50 years more advanced. Should we get to the but I'm interested in kind of pleased. I don't know. I mean, everybody's a marquee name. It's like you have to be famous to be a Trump appointee, it seems.
The Oz one is funny to me. And Lutnick, who was in the mix for Treasury, got appointed to Commerce instead.
Okay, that's fine. I don't really know what the Treasury guy did. Yeah. That's fine. Remember, Treasury was Tim Guyton during Obama, which was, he was one of the guys who was...
Geithner?
Was it, what did I say, Guyton? Who's Guyton?
Yeah, I don't know.
Tim Guyton. But the other big thing going on is this, there's an incoming trans congressman who is at the middle of a flap now. This is a man... No, yeah. This is a man who dresses now as a woman, is coming a Democrat, and Nancy Mace has filed a bill to block.
Yeah, he worked for Beau Biden, in fact. This guy.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah. So
with your piece,
that's how he got into politics, and now he's become the first trans congresswoman, theoretically. Sarah McBride from Delaware. So Nancy Mace, yes, has filed a bill to say that you can't go in the women's bathroom unless you unless you were born a woman.
Exactly.
Which
And
seems reasonable to a lot of people, especially she's
yes.
been sexually assaulted in the past.
right. And that's how the world was just a few years ago. It would
Right,
be
of course.
insane to think that you would let a guy go into the women's bathroom. Anyway, the left is doing its best to use muscle memory to remember how to be apoplectic over such things. So the ABC News reporter got to Nancy Mace outside of the Capitol building.
The question is, with your piece of legislation about banning women from using...
100% yes.
my question to you is...
It doesn't go far enough. I'll be filing more bills.
You have said that it was created in response to Congresswoman-elect McBride.
100%.
But should legislation be created targeted at one specific person?
It doesn't mention anyone in the legislation, but
you've said it was aimed at her.
No, I have said
Aimed
it's
at
a
her.
result of this. I'm not going to allow biological men into women's private spaces. I will stand in the brink and stand in the way of anyone on the radical left who thinks that it's okay for a penis to be in a women's locker room or a bathroom or a changing room. Hell no. I am not going to stand for it. And the Speaker said it would be in the House rules package. If it's not, I will be ready with a motion, a privileged motion, to force a vote on this. This is not okay. I'm a survivor of rape. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. And I'm not going to allow any man in any female private spaces.
Now, Speaker,
end of story. And by the way,
yeah.
I'm getting death threats from men pretending to be women. Why is it that these
By the way, you can see these all over Twitter. All the angry dudes with beards and long
There's
hair.
a video of one. Did you see that one?
No.
That she retweeted? I sent it to us of one creepy dude. And then they wonder why they're not wanted in women's bathrooms. But it's like the most insane behavior. And then here, I'm going to resend it to us.
And it's always like, you deserve to be raped for thinking this. You deserve to be like, okay, maybe this is why you shouldn't get to be in the bathroom with the girls.
Well, right. It's exactly the type of like predatory, weird, entitled behavior. That's exactly the reason. And, you know, Mike Johnson, they accosted him today to ask if he thinks Sarah McBride is a man or a woman. And he said he wasn't going to get into it for the particular person. But then he also said later today, like...
Then he got into it.
Then he said, you know what? Men can't become women.
Yeah,
Men
let's
stay
start
men.
with this psycho first.
This video goes out to Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, I hope that one day I do find you in that women's bathroom and I grab your ratty looking fucking hair and drag your face down to the floor while I repeatedly bash it in until the blood's everywhere and you're dead.
I don't see the problem.
Thank you. I hope that Nancy Mace receives this message well. Kisses.
Good job,
Okay,
trans
psycho.
movement. Good. That's great. But this is just like another reminder of why people have a problem with this ideology.
Well, yeah.
And like that,
Because
you know,
they're
we went from if an adult is truly in mental distress and they've been dealing with this mental distress their entire lives, is it the kind thing to do to just let them pretend and be nice to them and not like say anything to them and pretend they blend in? 2, now like we all have to like say this is absolutely real and not pretend at all. Or
Right.
we're bigoted and there's something wrong with us.
Right.
Right? Like, I think a lot of people can accept the idea that there are adults who have a mental disorder that causes them extreme distress with their body and sex and sex, right? And that maybe given our lack of understanding of mental health care, the easiest thing to do is let them do their thing and just try and be nice.
Sure.
Face to face.
Mm-hmm.
But that's different from saying that men literally become women. And there's absolutely no difference. There's no advantage in sports. It's fine to have them in locker rooms. It's fine to put them in prisons. We should all pay for their surgeries because it's absolutely medically necessary care. Like all of these other pieces that go along. And yes, this is part of the reason why they lost that election. It was not something that Republicans made up, it being a part of this election. This is something that the left has decided to force down everybody's throats, and they can't let it go. You see what they're doing to somebody like Seth Moulton, who made like the most tepid, lukewarm kind of comment about girls' sports that one could possibly make. And they're all going after him. Jen Psaki, multiple nights in a row, has been saying that it's absolutely not true that men have an advantage in sports over girls, all this stuff, Like, they're doubling down on, which, I mean, like, that's fine, I guess, if they want to politically double down on it. But it's an insane strategy. I think probably one of the smartest people on the left right now is Ben Dreyfus. Have you followed any of his
I've always
tweets
loved him.
He's very reasonable, but he essentially said, like...
It's Dreyfus. Like,
Dreyfus?
He's Dreyfus's kid.
Dreyfus, okay.
Do you know who Dreyfus is? Richard Dreyfus?
No, not really.
From Jaws?
Oh, he's the
nerdy
actor?
guy?
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he essentially said, like, if we're going to lose elections over this, then yeah, we should get on board with banning, like, sex change surgeries for kids, because the number of kids that's going to impact is so small. And, like, I agree with the rest of the stuff the Democratic Party does. If we're going to lose all of our elections because we're going to die on the hill of making sure children get trans surgeries, then we should absolutely just say that we're going to ban the children's trans surgeries.
Yeah, but like, we had mentioned this, Alice. Like, well, actually, it was somebody else's observation, but there comes a point, and this probably has something to, like, with Jen Psaki, or with, like, Catherine Clark, whose son or daughter, whatever it is, has been arrested again, is that there's going to come a point where the horror of what they've done and let their children befall them is going to be too big to reckon with oneself.
Of course.
It's too big to, you can't, it's just unthinkable. So they're just going to have to be a dead ender and just keep believing it.
Though, because you mentioned 2004, and like one of the lessons from 2004 that I think was an overwrought wrong one from Democrats was we can't talk about gay marriage ever and nobody can be for it, because that's how Bush won the election, right?
Yeah.
That was the lesson. And right now you have people coming out and saying we can never speak of trans kids in any positive fashion. And you're like, wait a second. First of all, there was
we can't speak of trans kids in any positive fashion. It's really threading a needle. No, it's not. But it's also just threading a needle that's her take.
Right.
Is a trans kid. If you've got an 8-year-old trans kid, you are throwing way adult level assumptions on that kid. It is highly irresponsible. It's crazy, and it's really the parents' mania manifesting itself in this project of their kiddo. And it's effing weird. And yes, of course it's abusive. Of course it is.
Ad that was run that was effective about Kamala Harris's answer to an ACLU questionnaire, and her answer when she, for like a couple of months in 2019, about supporting the funding paying for gender affirming care for undocumented immigrants in prison, right?
Prison. Yes, yeah.
First of all, I don't know who supports that. Why would most people support that? So let's just be clear about that.
No. Let's not be clear. By the way, this whipping boy who she's talking to is Tim Miller, of course.
Of course.
Who's the Republican. But no, it wasn't. It's not. The fanatics aren't just a few months that she held in 2019. These are what progressives believe.
Yeah, they actually want this. They agree with that position. Like,
yes.
Her saying, like, I don't know who believes this. Like, no, this is not a hypothetical. We have illegal immigrants in prison right now who would like to be moved into the women's prison.
Yes.
And are willing to get sex change surgery. So should we pay for that or no? Because your position is that we should. That's the Democratic Party and all these talking heads on TV and all the people who are protesting outside Seth Moulton's office. That's their real position on that. And it's incredibly out of step with the mainstream of where most people in America are.
Right. Absolutely.
That doesn't mean that you can't say, you know what? There are kids out there who are struggling through mental health issues, who were born in a body.
Mighty white of you, Jen. That doesn't mean that you can't say that, that there are kids with mental health issues. Oh, yeah, really? You think?
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like is their own, and we can be humane and support that as a society. I've also seen, and
it's so funny because it's such a straw man, and she's saying we can be humane and support that as a society.
Out of this room right now. I've had enough of this evening. Okay, it's not funny. No, don't touch any cables, and you're not sleeping in that room.
I mean, it's such a straw man that she's putting up there. It doesn't mean we can't be humane. The problem is this. Everybody's for being humane if a kid is confused. It's not humane to follow the kid's decision tree leading up to the removal of breasts, okay? Psycho, and they know this stuff. But they can't help it because as a nation was swept up on this, so are they with affirmation. Affirmation.
So if you've already cut your kid's breasts off, how can you possibly admit that you did something that horrific for no reason?
Right, because it makes you a butcher.
You have to continue to go down this path. I mean, like the doctors at like Children's Hospital that have supported this stuff and been in favor of it. How could they possibly admit that they were wrong and did this to all these kids for no reason? That their protocols for determining who should qualify for these surgeries were completely off base.
Of course.
Like, how can they say that? How can they turn around and say that now? It's like, what it reminds me of, if we're going to talk about healthcare and like the influence of these pharmaceutical giants and how doctors make decisions and how wrong they are so much of the time. I read a really interesting article today, and I think this is going to be like one of the next big medical scandals that comes out, is they're finally starting to admit that some of the young people that they prescribe SSRIs to kill themselves because of the SSRIs. That a lot of these drugs, particularly Prozac, like you give them to young people and a lot of them can cause suicidality, right? And yes, sometimes kids are suicidal beforehand. It's not fully understood the mechanism, but we don't understand how these drugs work anyway, like even when they work to make people happy. So I mean, to admit that that's a real trade-off and a risk, and this particular article was following kids in New Zealand who had killed themselves after they were prescribed these drugs, and like the parents say they weren't warned that that was a potential side effect and all these things, and they're saying, well, it is on the package insert, do you know, and all the, but who reads that stuff, right? And if the doctors aren't warning people, like, are you really giving people consent? But it's going to be like that.
Right.
Like the medical experts, and we have an attitude towards medicine where we trust these experts and we trust that they've done the research and they know and all these things. They just don't really know. They're just following what they're being told. The studies have been done and all this stuff, that it's fine. And they're not really looking at it with a critical eye to say who should be getting these drugs, who's at most risk of increased suicidality. Like, I think it's going to be a big scandal because somebody said it in our chat the other day. Should we talk about the fact that, you know, a lot of school shooters are on drugs like this, right? And you can say, you know, is it because they were already screwed up that we put them on the drugs? But the truth is that, like, lots and lots of these cases involve these drugs, and we are not being responsible if we do not take a hard look at them and say, is there a chance that some of these are pushing people over the edge, you know? And people assume that when they go to doctors for help with problems like this, that the thing the doctor is telling you to do is going to help you. But I mean, like, I think of that mom that killed 2 of her kids and is going to be in jail for life, like trying to kill herself. That, you know, she had you know, what's it called? When you have a kid.
Martyrdom, depression, postpartum.
Not postmortem.
No, it's
postpartum.
Postpartum. There you
postpartum
go.
depression.
Get close, my friend.
Postpartum depression. That, you know, she had gone to the doctors and they had prescribed her drugs, and she killed 2 of her kids and tried to kill herself. Like, It's a tough thing that people trust doctors to make these decisions, and the doctors are wrong with no consequences all the time. And it takes them decades and decades and decades to admit it.
And we've also talked about, and there's a word for it, I forgot what it's called, all of these research papers, etc., that are just flimsy as hell and wrong as hell, and they feed off of each other, these papers, Alice. You know, and so they quote these other papers, and they're all diluted and they're all wrong. Many of them are wrong. There's a word for this when all of these research papers are incorrect, and it grows exponentially, because the first one's diluted and inconclusive, whatever, and then another one bases some of its research off that one because it's peer reviewed and settled science, this and this. And so once the drug gets to the doctor, they assume it's been vetted, and so there you go. Like even our doctor, like, fine, yeah, of course, we got the latest from JAMA or the Cambridge Medical, whatever it is. And it is that the best treatment is to affirm the child's this and affirm the child's that, and that's what we do. And so these doctors, they're wearing lab coats, and the waiting rooms are very busy, but there's a lot of hackery happening.
And I'll be the first to say, like, I think there's modern miracles that come from the pharmaceutical industry and modern medicine all the time. All the time.
You're not the first one to say that, just...
No,
so you know.
but for saying I'll be the first one to say it means that I'm very willing to say it.
Yes.
It's an expression. It's called an idiom in the English language.
What did you call me? You're an idiom.
My point is that I'm actually like pretty big on modern medicine and anti, silliness. And I think that a lot of things that super crunchy people think about the healthcare industry are also wrong. Like, I'm totally willing to sign up for the healthcare industry in a lot of ways. And I think that they do a lot of really incredible, amazing things. But at the same time, it is shocking to me the level to which they're willing to go with the flow on stuff that has clearly for decades been problematic. Like I decades ago was reading articles on the problems with SSRIs, and particularly for young people, that they could cause suicidal thoughts. Like, I mean, that's been a thing for a long time. And the fact that they're still prescribing them at the levels that they are, and not, they talk all the time about the mental health care crisis in this country. What if we're fueling it? Because people seek out mental health care all the time, and you assume that if you seek it out that you're going to get the help that you need, that you're doing the right thing, but they just don't. Like, it takes so long for it to catch up with this stuff, but yeah, like you're going to trust the people that did lobotomies and prescribe drugs like this and do all these things that gave pregnant women thalidomide and every other thing. Like, you can't trust them, especially when stuff is new.
Totally
I think the newer that stuff is, and the more subtle it is, right? Like, I think that obviously Broken Bones, they know what they're doing. The bone is in two pieces. It's like this. You put them back together in a straight line and they grow back together. Like, it's like things like that.
Although that is, primitive.
It is primitive, and the body is doing most of the work. But but they do a good job at stuff like that.
Agreed.
They're mechanics. They're good at stuff like that. When it comes to like the brain and nutrition and human sexuality and self-perception, and I mean, these are really complex topics. And we don't understand the human mind at all, frankly. We can't replicate a human mind.
Right.
But, and it has really, this is going to sound silly, but like a spiritual dimension.
How so?
Like all this mental health stuff, of which the trans stuff is a part of mental health, clearly.
I could certainly see that in terms of fulfillment, happiness, sadness. Yeah, I think, I guess you could say that if you're somebody who's devout, and is super strong in your faith, and you're getting emotional fulfillment, then it is doing something somewhere.
Well, right.
Things are happening, things are firing, and chemicals are going in your brain.
Well, yeah, and more than that, like your brain and your mind and your body are all connected, right? and physical things that you do have a real impact on your brain. Like, we know stuff like that exercise impacts your mind.
Mm-hmm.
We know, obviously, nutrition impacts your mind. We know that, you know, and we understand some of this stuff on a primitive level. We know that hugging a baby causes your body to produce oxytocin, which gives you happy feelings, right? Like, we know some of these things, how they work, sort of, but we have a very primitive understanding of it. And like, that's one reason why like the psychedelic stuff is interesting, because psilocybin that's in mushrooms is one controlled substance that's very well known to produce not just hallucinogenic experiences, but specifically spiritual experiences in people. People experience a spiritual reality when they do some of these drugs that is a real thing, a real and separate thing from its impacts on their mental and physical health, right? And it's well known to produce experiences like that. Like, we can differ on whether that or not that's a healthy way to experience spirituality, but it's very, I mean, like, there's a reason why people use like ayahuasca in spiritual rituals historically.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because I've only done mushrooms once. And when I did it, it was 4 hours of the same mind-blowing experience as it was when we saw the eclipse, which was like totally new. And we were in the path in Vermont, and like this was like, oh, this is the real, actual, very detailed reality version of something I'd heard about, but now I'm walking into it with the eclipse. Like at that point when we saw the eclipse and everything went and it went dark, etc., and we sat there. At that point, like anything could happen.
Yeah,
which was kind of like that mushroom trip that I took. It was like okay. I saw a kid running and his fluorescent jacket was like through the woods, and I was like, holy God. Like, you saw incredible things. The clouds were, and I was sharing with a friend, like the clouds were making shapes and doing things that we both saw together.
Right.
It was like something happened, like, or something happens where, and I'm not a acid trip guy, but there's no doubt parts of our brains that you get a realtor's tour into with some of these things.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the jury remains out. Is it parts of your brain or is it parts of something else? Right. I mean, I don't know, but that's what I say when I mean like mental health in particular, and physical health to a degree, but mental and physical health have a dimension that's not purely physical. And that's something that we like absolutely cannot address in the modern world with our sense that everything is purely physical. I go to the doctor, they give me a pill, I take the pill, I feel better. End of story, right? And it's actually not that simple.
No.
I mean, like, we don't even understand necessarily the placebo effect, because that's not even as simple as like, I think the pill's going to help me, so it helps me. You know, like, we don't understand the interactions between our mind and our body and spirituality at all. At all. Particularly when it comes to things like our emotional health and suicide and all these issues. Like, we just don't get it. And something that's as nebulous as our perceived gender, the idea that that's some kind of physical, mental condition that you can fix with a surgery is preposterous. Preposterous, because your self-perception of your sex and who you are is a much, much bigger question than like what your body looks like. You know, and that is a question with a spiritual dimension. I'm sorry, but like, it really is, I think, a religious freedom issue, because if you're telling me to affirm, not just be polite to somebody who's in distress, right? Which I think a lot of people can get behind. But if you're telling me to affirmatively state that I truly believe that such and such a person is a woman, then you're asking me to make a spiritual statement about the reality of what womanhood is and this idea that you can, on some deeper spiritual level, be a woman. They're making a metaphysical statement. Do you know what I'm saying? Because they're saying there exists some metaphysical category of woman that is undetectable by current physical methods, and that we have to make physical reality match it. That's a religious question to say, like, this person on the inside is a woman. Like, what does that mean?
It's a cop-out.
It's a religious
it's
belief.
A cop. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's a cop-out. But yeah, you're right about that. And one other thing about, let's say in this case, the suite, SUITE, of energy and influences, etc., that is a common thing that we've seen together before, and that I'm sure that you guys have seen before, is when you go to a rehab, not a drug and alcohol rehab, but like you're going to die in the next year rehab for an old person, and they bring in the dogs. And the dogs overwhelm these people with all sorts of energy, all sorts of emotions, and like these dogs that jump up into bed when they're not supposed to, these people instantly get a salve from that. And they're getting they're getting the look and feel, but not only that, but they're getting the positivity of a dog thrilled to see you. You know, 83-year-old woman close to death, and it hits, I think, for a lot of people in a way that only that can. And it's like something happens, and there's no doubt if you ask nurses, etc., that something happens. Like even when my own mother was, pretty much close to dying, she would hold our daughter, even though my mother's back was broken, as I remember, she'd hold our daughter in a way that was obviously painful for her, but she was just getting something from it. Our newborn daughter at that point. There was something happening. And there is no doubt in my mind that manifested itself in her in ways that we can't explain, and also ways that medication wouldn't. Like, certainly the battery medicine she was on helped her, but it also was destroying her, Right. The spiritual fulfillment or injection you get from playing with a dog that likes you or a new granddaughter, that is something that I believe probably had no downside. That's just something. So the spirituality thing, I think, is... I mean, the thing is, like, we're delving into more of the unknown. So, like,
well, yeah, but I think the overall point is, especially as we're talking about some of these issues, like the trans issues, we're talking about things that cannot be known and understood, and the fact that we treat medical professionals as though they can fully understand these issues and they're some kind of experts in like how people perceive their own sex or sexuality or any of these issues, it's just such an impoverished view of reality. This idea that we can go to these essentially like human body mechanics and they can tell you about your kid's self-perception and their mental state and all this stuff, and that they're going to be able to give your kid a surgery that's going to make them happy.
It's barbaric.
Is a bizarro world thing. And like I think that if you go through life thinking that like doctors and science, I mean, there's sort of a joke online, these like internet atheists who have the little like atom symbol as their like religious symbol on social media, and they think, or they have like the little Darwin fish instead of the Jesus fish on their car. Like they just think that if they learn enough science, like they can explain everything. And maybe you just can't, and you can't explain everything. Maybe there's not a pill you can take for every single thing in the world. Maybe there's not a surgery you can do for every single thing in the world. Maybe happiness doesn't come in a pill bottle at the doctor's office.
Well, right. These are people who feel immediately more superior than 1 billion people on Earth because they know for a fact there's no way you can get 2 of every animal on a boat. We should do the chat. I think we did. Did we miss a bunch of stuff? Did we hit everything? I don't know. We're out of batteries.
Nancy Mace thing was the big story, really. That was, I mean, it was a lot of back and forth about that, a lot of sound cuts about that. The Democrats still are not, taking this well, but I don't think there was that much new.
Very deep version of Alice tonight. Albie. Steve from Merrimack, Steve from Gloucester will not be happy. Will not be happy.
One of my new favorite things is there's a poll for the 2028 Democratic presidential primary that has Harris winning with 41%, Newsom with 8%, Shapiro with 7%, Buttigieg with 6%, and Walz with 6%. So that's
perfect.
Good.
I hope Walz is the nominee.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey,
I was reading and listening to a few media outlets and podcasts where they said that Trump should have a media blackout against MSNBC, CNN, and obviously places like the New York Times and Washington Post. And I was wondering if he would just be buying into the mentality that people have when it comes to their feelings with how he acts. The far left loves to crucify him, vilify him. And I think that doing the opposite, going on MSNBC, going on CNN, while also not forgetting Fox and Newsmax and, the New York Post, for example, is only going to help him expand his popularity, because back then, for example, people were like, whoa, why is he treating Jim Acosta poorly? But after, a couple of times of listening to Jim Acosta, you realize that he was the villain and not Trump. So I think, him going on The View or going on with Joe and Mika might actually be more beneficial, because at the end of the day, we're going to realize, like, the people on The View and Joe and Mika are actually the villains and not him. So I would, if I was Trump, I'd go on everything like he did leading up to beating Kamala Harris. What do you guys think?
I agree. I think he should go on everything. I mean, I think his lack of going on like The View hasn't been because he hasn't wanted to. I think he's always been pretty good about talking to everybody, maybe to his detriment, talking to everybody.
I think there's part of him who doesn't want to give them the views, doesn't want to give them the ratings.
I think that that's true, but I think at the same time, he likes to be liked, and I think he would go on Morning Joe again. I think he'd go on The View
definitely.
again. If they would have him on The View again, Whoopi and Joy and all those people, they invited him on. And yeah, I mean, I agree with Steve also in the aspect that, like, the media's unhinged behavior about him when he's just being him definitely pushes people more towards Trump than almost anything else.
I totally agree. I also think that, like, what we're seeing since the election is, yes, there are some people who have gone hysterical and who are just simply now lunatics. But many people have just been abandoned. This took the wind. This smote progressive journalism like in one lightning strike. It was like, I couldn't. This is not what I expected. This is not what I predicted. I figured that they'd all be, just all 24/7 crisis, etc. People would hit the streets, etc. And I'm sure they will for the inauguration. But no, this is a really big blow to unhinged progressive media. Like, we are back down to like 2002 level of progressive media, which the media was always liberal and progressive, but not always psychotic. And that's what I think we're seeing some of that now. Hopefully it stays.
Didn't either of you get something tied after Peter Rabbit was born?
What?
No, we both refused.
Is Alice tracking for future impregnation?
That is, I guarantee you, on the table of her. That is something she's.
I do not want to be pregnant again, but neither one of us will do that.
Why should I be altered? I mean,
why should I be altered?
Because you're done. You wrap it up. Call it a night. You're done. I have a new hot wife coming.
I could have
probably
a future husband and have like 3-4 more kids.
No, you
I'm
can't.
Young.
No, you have to take care of these ones. Deadbeat.
Tom, are you going to be like the Tony Randall of this generation
Tony
having a
Randall?
big...
You don't know what Tony Randall is?
No.
He's in The Odd Couple. He had kids like up till he was like 77. I think, who was the other guy? The guy who was, oh, God, the Mexican guy, too. He used to have a lot of kids. I just do what I'm told, Dr. Cheswick. Okay?
Our new Secretary of Transportation has 9, so...
That's right. That's
so we're
what's his name?
behind.
Sean Duffy, who I have interviewed before, who I used to hate because I'd be carousing Beacon Hill in the real world, which he was on, and so was his wife, the real world before. He'd be there, and all the chicks always wanted to meet him, so I hated him. I'm not over that, by the way.
Baby at 76.
Yep.
What is happening over there?
Alice has a chart that she could show you, as a matter of fact, that she shares with the world of what is happening over here. I am essentially being human trafficked for Alice's pleasure.
Why is she tracking everything?
Correct.
This sounds cult-like to me.
Yes.
Anyway, I wanted to call and just say, don't bother playing my all-you-can-eat podcast messages because it's now been months.
No, we played it, dude.
They're irrelevant.
We played one, but we didn't play anything new. Was there a new one we were supposed to play?
There
on
might
the
have
most
been. No, we played
recent
the other one. We're gonna do. I'm gonna do an all-you-can-eat show, no matter what, tomorrow, with Alice or not. You can chart O's, Alice, while I'm doing this.
Hi, Steve from Merrimack.
Hey, Steve.
I'm playing a little catch up here, but you know who else kept an orgasm diary?
No.
Leopold and Loeb, the gay thrill killers from the 1930s.
Really?
So really in good company there. And the talk about this thing also reminded me of, did you ever watch that show Big Little Lies with Nicole Kidman and Reese Witherspoon? It was actually a pretty good miniseries. But there's a character in it, a female character, who keeps a masturbation diary. Who the hell has time for that?
Yeah.
Jesus, mine would look like one of the old sets of Encyclopedia Britannica if I did that. Ay, thank you.
It was a voluminous collection, Alice. That's what he means.
I get what he means.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys maybe overlooking the fact that maybe Rich Lowry was pronouncing Pete's name wrong because he was just breaking chops and it was his way of kind of retaliating at the fact that Trump perhaps made a bad pick? I mean, I know that Tucker Carlson would call Kamala Harris Carmela on purpose because he didn't like her and didn't think that she deserved to be president. And I kind of was doing that in my messages over the past few weeks before, Tom, you had said that I don't think her name's Carmela, and obviously I know that, but, calling her that was just a way to break chops. So I think sometimes you have to realize that it isn't that they're, oblivious to the fact that they're pronouncing the name wrong. I think they're doing that on purpose just to break chops, again, like Tucker does with Kamala Harris. Okay.
So that's interesting, Steve, because, Alice, how did Rich Lowry... First of all, what is Pete's actual last name? Hegseth. How did Rich Lowry pronounce it?
Hesketh.
Okay. So he pronounced it how again?
Hesketh.
Okay. Now we've got the most recent Editors podcast has come out today. Listen to this.
So Charlie, you're a Hegsketh guy. That's officially what you are now.
We've got a new pronunciation. Hegsketh.
So Charlie, you're a Hegsketh guy. That's officially what you are.
So there we go. So yeah, he is having trouble tackling that name. I think it's fair to say he cannot handle that name. I don't know what it's.
Do you think it's like a disability?
Yeah.
Hey guys, sure you've heard the good news by now that Steve from Gloucester is being allowed back on the Minahan show.
I did hear that.
With any luck, he'll swear off the burn barrel, and we won't have to put up with his diatribes day in and day out. So goodbye, Steve. It was nice knowing you. See you when you come back the next time after Minahan dumps you.
Wow. Alice, do you think that he would deny us like the Three Crows did to David? Did he?
Not.
Did he deny us? I
think he would. Yes.
Oh my goodness!
Just like the
you
Three
don't
Crows.
know. You don't know him like I know him, Alice. My goodness.
Hi, Steve from Merrimack.
Hey, Steve.
Alice, I ask this of you. Can you now do an entire series of all-you-can-eats just on oils, please? It would make me so happy. Thank you.
Here you go, Albie. Could you arrange that? Could that be a thing that you can do? Is that in your
I'm not sure how
bailiwick?
much more I have to say about oils, to be honest. You might have.
It was quite a clinic.
You might have exhausted my oil knowledge. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, to the show and the All You Can Eat podcast. Appreciate you guys listening so much. If you want to join us for live streams, you can do that at patreon.com/burnbarrel. There's also some extra content each week. There's also an RSS feed where you can listen ad-free every single day if that's what you like. If you enjoy listening with ads for free, you can find us at burnbarrelpodcast.com. There's links to all different places to listen.
C'est la vie.